Shalom, WJC family. My pleasure to share with you my remarks from Parshat Vayechi, which we read last week in Shul, which I think also are appropriate for Parshat Shemot, as they deal with the transition from the book of Bereshit to the book of Shemot, the book, as we call them in English, of Genesis to the book of Exodus. And I want to start with a classic. There's a Jewish person who's shipwrecked on a desert island. Eventually he comes to be rescued, and they see that he's built 3 structures. The rescuers say, "What is this one here?" And he says, "My house." "What is this one here?" He says, "That's my synagogue." "And what is this one here?" "It's a synagogue I wouldn't set foot in." I was thinking about that joke when I was marching with 25,000 Jews across the Brooklyn Bridge a week and a half ago. We were marching against anti-Semitism, and because of a number of attacks against Jews here in the New York area and beyond. What was interesting to me is most of those attacks were on Haredim, what we usually call ultra-Orthodox Jews. Some people like that title, some people don't, so we'll call them Haredim. The people who were marching across the bridge, by and large, were not Haredim. They were people who look like me, or even less Jewish. I at least wear a kippah, or I wear a kippah all the time, so I am notably Jewish when other people, maybe they weren't Jewish, or maybe they just don't wear outward signs of their Judaism. They all gathered together to march against these anti-Semitic attacks, and I asked myself, why do all these, non-Haredi Jews show up to march on behalf of all these Haredi Jews, especially because it is very possible that my synagogue, the Westchester Jewish Center, is among the synagogues that a Haredi Jew would not set foot in. So what's going on here? I think we get a bit of an answer from this, what's happening here in this transfer from Parshat Vayechi to Parshat Shemot. And we see it in the way that Jacob and Joseph talk about their burials. At the beginning of Parshat Vayechi, Jacob says, "Joseph, when I die, bury me in Canaan, in the cave of Machpelah with my ancestors." And Joseph does. When Joseph dies at the end of the Parsha on his deathbed, he tells his brothers, "One day God is going to remember you, and when he does, please take up my bones to the Holy Land." So what's the difference? The difference is Joseph is going to stay with the people until they are ready to go, and only when the people are redeemed will Joseph go up to Canaan with them. Why the difference? Well, one possibility is that Jacob was always the patriarch of a clan, of a big family, and as such, he wanted to be buried with the previous patriarchs of his family, Abraham and Isaac, and their wives. Joseph knows a different kind of leadership. He's been a national leader of Egypt, and he knows what it means to be a nation and what it means to need national leadership. And for him, a leader always stays with his people. It's not about going back to your family. It's about the future of your people. That's national leadership. That's communal leadership. And Joseph, seems to be our first national leader. It is a style of leadership that will continue in Shemot under Moshe. Jacob is a leader of a family, 70 in number, that comes down to Egypt. Moshe leads a people 2 million or so strong out of Egypt. National leadership means you stay with your people wherever they are. Family leadership means you go back to the homestead and you rejoin your ancestors. And this idea that we are a family who becomes a nation right before our eyes in the transition of these 2 books, I think informs us a little bit about the phenomenon of non-Haredi Jews marching for Haredi Jews. And by the way, vice versa, Haredi Jews, if and when they speak up for non-Haredi Jews. Even though we seem so different, we seem not to speak, we seem sometimes not even to get along, or even to accept one another as Jewish sometimes, or at least as their methodology of practicing Judaism as valid. And yet, why do we step up for one another? Because, as the Torah teaches throughout Bereshit, we are a family. And when we evolve into a nation, through Joseph and through Moshe in this week's Parsha, Shemot, we remain sort of a family. Right? And families, even if they don't get along, even if they have moved apart, even if they try and avoid being around each other, when push comes to shove, when the family is threatened, they back each other up. And not only that, I was also thinking about this when I had the opportunity to attend another giant gathering of Jewish people earlier in 2020, which is pretty good considering we were only about 10 days in when I marched across the Brooklyn Bridge. But on New Year's Day, I went to Giant Stadium and I attended the Siyum Hashas with 90,000 Haredi men, a handful of some, I don't know, hundreds or thousand-ish Haredi women, and a few people like me. And when I got there, it was funny. I Giant season ticket holder. The coat I wear in Giant Stadium is this bright red parka, very appropriate for the New York Football Giants. Maybe not as appropriate for this gathering. Little did I think about the fact that even the Haredi winter jackets would all be navy blue and black. And so wearing this red jacket, I felt like I was dressed like a clown. I stood out like a sore thumb. And I felt for the whole first while of the ceremony, which was hours and hours long, like a foreigner. Like I was out of place and like I didn't really belong there. It was interesting. I enjoyed the teaching. I enjoyed the learning. I enjoyed the singing and the music and the prayers. But it didn't feel like it was mine. Then, hours and hours in, we get through the special Kaddish that they say for finishing all of studying all of the Talmud, all of Shas. And there is, as it said in the program, dancing in place. Simcha dancing in place. So we all start back and forth. The bleachers are shaking, right, to all these Jewish men back and forth to the music, and it was beautiful. And one of these Haredi men, maybe he seemed like he was in his 30s, black hat, black coat, bright gingy red beard and payas, came down and grabbed my hand, and we started dancing together. And you know what? Then it felt like family. I no longer felt like an outsider, because that's how family works, right? There are two times when family is family no matter what. One is for simchas, and the other is when we're threatened. And in these two events, 10 days apart, I was able to experience both. The fact that we are a family, as much as we are a nation or a people, that is one of the secrets to our survival, right? A nation forged from a family somehow remains a family. And that's what the Torah taught us in the book of Bereshit, in the book of Genesis, that we are from a family, and in some ways we remain a family. And it is one of the keys to our survival for thousands of years. Unfortunately, it's been tested time and again. But the way family works is no matter how hard you even want to get away from your family, when these two things happen, great simchas, great joy, great celebration, and unfortunately great threats, bring families back together. We come together to celebrate, to grieve, and we come together when our backs are against the wall. In this trying moment in our history, I think it helps to remember that we can have the strength to overcome any challenge we face. We have had to do it far too many times in our history. The threats of anti-Semitism from the outside and the threats of our own fragmentation from the inside. But because the family that becomes a nation in the Torah portion this week and the week before creates a nation that remains a family, we remain a family. And pray that in these difficult times, this family protect one another, care for one another, succeed and prosper together, and hopefully only has reason to come together in the future to celebrate together. It should happen speedily in our days. Shabbat Shalom.